Back in the hot seat, Attorney General Jeff Sessions will appear before the House Judiciary Committee later today. Last month, he told a Senate panel that he had no knowledge of any contact between Donald Trump's presidential campaign and Russia. That was before former Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos admitted to the FBI that he had contact with Russian operatives. As part of the probe, it was revealed Papadopoulos attended a national security meeting back in March of 2016 with then National Security Advisor Jeff Sessions and told of his Russian connections. Joining me now in an exclusive interview is the chairman of the House Oversight Committee and House Judiciary Committee member, South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Connect the dots for us. What are you expecting to hear from the Attorney General today?
Well, Maria, this is a general oversight hearing, so the topics will range. It's a really big entity with a large jurisdiction. I'm sure my Democrat friends are going to ask him about Russia and Carter Page and George Papadopoulos. Keep in mind, he is coming before the House Intel Committee. We're going to interview him in 3 weeks, so my questions will be reserved for that. You're going to hear questions about special counsel. I always have Republican and Democrat friends who want to channel Jeff Spicoli and ask about marijuana, because if we just legalize that, all of our problems would go away. I'm going to ask about firearms, because I think it's really important that we figure out how to keep guns out of the hands of people that are legally prohibited from having them before they kill people.
Right.
So that's going to be what I question, but I'm sure the Democrats will ask about Russia.
Look, I know that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is going to be paying close attention to these hearings. How could Sessions' testimony affect his investigation? I mean, people are wondering why we're continuing to follow all of this potential collusion between the Trump administration and the Russians when we already have evidence that there was collusion on the Democrat side, Congressman.
Well, you can do both. You can investigate both.
But are they? Are you investigating both? And is Robert Mueller investigating both?
I can't speak for Robert Mueller. I can tell you the House Intelligence Committee and the House Judiciary Committee is looking into 2016. And in particular, the House Intelligence Committee is interested in the dossier and what connection it had to the DNC. But we're capable of investigating two things at the same time. And what Robert Mueller is doing, I don't know and I'm not supposed to know. I am sure Jim Jordan and some of my Republican colleagues are going to press the Attorney General really hard on their request that he appoint a second special counsel. I think the world of Jim. I did not sign on to that letter, and I don't know that we need a second special counsel. But if the fact pattern warrants investigating it, it should be investigated. I just don't think special counsel is talismanic.
Well, maybe because people are wondering if there are conflicts of interest with regard to Robert Mueller, and maybe he's actually incapable of truly doing an independent investigation of his former colleagues at the FBI, for example.
Well, we have an entire Department of Justice, and we have 94 U.S. attorneys' offices, and they are all welcome to look into any fact pattern that has a federal basis and jurisdiction. So special counsel only comes into play when all of those other entities have a conflict of interest. So assume for the sake of argument Robert Mueller does have a conflict of interest. You have an entire Department of Justice and 94 other U.S. attorneys' offices that are free to follow any fact pattern they want to follow. So Mueller doesn't need to do it, and you don't need a special counsel to do it. You just need the Department of Justice to do what your tax dollars are already paying them to do, which is investigate federal fact patterns.
I'm glad you put it that way, Congressman, because that's exactly right. But are they doing it? I mean, isn't it interesting that you have the President of the United States tweeting out the Department of Justice should do this, the Department of Justice should look at this? I mean, people are scratching their heads and saying, well, why isn't the Department of Justice doing all of this stuff? Why do we have to hear the President ask the DOJ to do something when, in fact, everybody knows that these are clear issues that need investigating?
Well, Maria, I'll tell you when I scratched my head for the first time, and it was in November of 2016 when the president said she's already been through enough. So that's never the barometer of whether or not somebody should be investigated, whether they've, quote, been through enough. I like to follow facts. And if the facts warrant an investigation, whether somebody's been through a lot or whether they've had a great day, it doesn't matter if the facts warrant investigating. So with all due respect to the president, I didn't agree with him in November of 2016 when he said don't look into it. And regardless of who says look into it now, that's a fact-centric inquiry. And if the predicate facts are there, then I expect the FBI, who's supposed to be neutral and apolitical and independent, to follow whatever facts wherever they go.
Supposed to be. Are they?
2016 was a really rough year for the FBI, which is one reason that Bob Goodlatte on the Judiciary Committee and I are investigating the decisions they made in 2016. And that's a bipartisan inquiry. His decision to announce one investigation and not the other, to write the public letter and then write a second public letter, whether or not he made up his mind before he interviewed 24 witnesses. We can survive bad members of Congress. We can survive bad lots of things. We cannot survive a Department of Justice that your viewers do not have confidence in. So I am all for looking into their objectivity and their independence. I am not all for me directing what investigations they should pursue and not pursue.
No, I think you make all the right points, but I think this is the heart of the issue. People are not sure if, in fact, they are looking at an independent FBI, an independent Department of Justice, and, in fact, if they are just following facts. That's the point.
Yeah, and it breaks my heart that you would even have to ask that question. I worked there for a long time, and I have a tremendous amount of respect. The best client I've ever had, Maria, was a blindfolded woman holding a set of scales. And whether you're Republican or Democrat or don't care about politics, you need to have confidence in your Department of Justice. So I think a lot of the questions Jeff Sessions is going to get today is going to be about that independence. But also moving forward, Congress has a role to play, which is why Chairman Goodlatte and I are unapologetic about looking into decisions made in 2016. And some of those decisions infuriated Democrats and some of them infuriated Republicans. But we need to look into all of them because there may be a benign explanation for all of the above, or it may be that the FBI was putting its finger on the scale in an election cycle. And if that's true, we need to know about it, and we need to make sure it never happens again.
Well, thank God for you and that you're in place, because people have trust and in your credibility. And this is the reason that the Attorney General, came up with this idea to call senior federal prosecutors and review, quote, certain issues that could link the Uranium One deal to the Clinton Foundation. At issue was the pay-to-play deal that resulted in a Russian company purchasing American uranium mines, 20% of the stockpile of the U.S. Hillary Clinton signed off on the deal back in 2010 when she was Secretary of State. Then you had her husband, Bill Clinton, getting $500,000 speaking fee from Russia around the same time. Should a special counsel be appointed? Who's going to look into this stuff?
Well, again, Congress is looking into it. Of course, we can't charge anyone with anything. Special counsel is appropriate if a conflict exists. And I'm not talking about a conflict with Robert Mueller. He's not supposed to be looking into Uranium One. But we have an entire Department of Justice headed by someone that President Trump picked named Jeff Sessions. And he is free to follow any fact pattern, including the fact pattern in 2010. From a congressional standpoint, I'm very interested. I've spent almost all of 2017 trying to figure out what Russia did in our 2016 election cycle. It is not beyond the pale that they also would not have been our friend in 2010 when we were selling them our uranium reserves. So I am all for looking into it. Whether or not it has anything to do with Hillary Clinton or not is of no consequence to me. It is worth looking into solely because I don't think Russia was our friend in 2010 any more than they were in 2016.
Of course they weren't. I remember 15 years ago when I went to Moscow, I was on a business trip. I was told by my company at the time, don't bring your BlackBerry. As soon as you get into Russian airspace, they have access to everything, and they are looking, and they're looking, and I remember knowing that 15 years ago. So it's not a new story that Russia has been trying to undermine us. But what is the narrative that has been created over these last 2 years is that the Trump administration has anything to do with it. Now, I want your comments there.
Well, I'm just smiling because Mitt Romney said that Russia was our greatest geopolitical enemy, and the Democrats laughed at him. So
he was right.
I'm just smiling at the irony of politics.
Yeah, let me ask you this, because now there's this whole other complication with Roy Moore. So the speculation is some people would like Jeff Sessions to go be the write-in candidate if Roy Moore even is elected, and then he steps aside. Would you like to see that happen?
Well, I come from a state where Strom Thurmond actually was elected by a write-in, and the mayor of my hometown was elected by a write-in. So it can be done. I think there's a better way to do it, which is if a candidate is not qualified, that candidate should be removed. Or if it's too late to remove them, just let the voters know the person will not be seated. Write-ins, unless your name is Thurmond or Strom, it's difficult.
Congressman, it's good to have you on the program this morning. Thanks so much. We're counting on you. Congressman Trey Gowdy.